On the seventh morning of my marriage, I stood at the wash line before the sun was fully up, and I could not feel my own feet. I was 19 years old. The grass was still gray with dew, and the first of Aaron's shirts was so heavy with water that when I lifted it to the line, my arms shook, and I had to set it back in the basket and hold the wooden post with both hands until the shaking passed. I had been on my feet since 4:30 every day for a week, and I remember thinking, very calmly, the way you think a thing that frightens you too much to feel, that if I let go of the post, I would simply fold down into the wet grass and not get up. My name was Sadie. I had been an Amish wife for exactly 7 days, and I could barely stand. I want to tell you what an older woman said to me that morning by the line, because it is the sentence I built the next 5 years on top of without ever once questioning it. But first, I have to tell you how a bride comes to be holding a post at dawn, unable to feel her feet, in the first week of the life she had prayed for. Because none of it looked like harm. That was the whole trouble, and I did not have a word for it yet. We were married in November, in my parents' front room, with 63 people standing because there were not enough benches. I was 19. Aaron was 26, previously married, which is the phrase we use in our district instead of the word widower, the way you would describe a field that had been planted once before. His first wife had died in childbirth 2 winters earlier, and no one spoke of it, because the bishop had said it was God's will, and in our community, that sentence is a door that closes and you do not knock on it again. On my wedding day, I wore no white gown the way the English do. I wore a new plain dress in a deep blue my mother and I had sewn through October, and I was so happy that morning that my hands trembled buttoning it, and my mother pressed them flat between her own and told me a good bride keeps her joy quiet so it does not turn to pride. I did not know yet that in 3 days I would begin to learn how many things a wife is meant to keep quiet, and that joy was only the first and the easiest of them. What no one tells a girl before her wedding is that the wedding is not the end of the work. It is the beginning of a season of it. In our way, there is no honeymoon, no going off alone together, no door you close on the world. Instead, there are the visiting weeks, and for a new couple, the visiting weeks are relentless. Every day after the wedding, the families come, in shifts, in buggies, to eat at the new wife's table, and to see what kind of housekeeper the young man has chosen. And the young wife cooks for all of them. I cooked for 11 people on the second day, and 19 on the fourth, and I lost the count entirely by the fifth. I rose at 4:30 to start the bread and the coffee. I stood at the stove through every meal so that I could serve and never sit, and I was still scrubbing pots by lamplight when the last buggy went down the lane. No one was cruel to me. Every woman who came complimented my pie. And every night I lay down beside a man I did not yet know and felt my whole body ringing like a struck bell, and I told myself that this was simply what it cost to be chosen, and that the cost was fair. I did not have a word for it yet. The first thing I understood, somewhere in that week, was that my exhaustion was not a thing anyone would ever measure, because it was the exact thing I was for. A new wife is judged by how invisible her labor looks. If the coffee is hot and the floor is clean and the pie is high, then the work behind it must not be spoken of, because to speak of it would be to complain, and a bride who complains in her first week has told the whole district what kind of wife she intends to be. So I learned very fast to carry the tiredness the way you carry a full pail across a frozen yard without spilling, by not looking down at it. When Aaron's aunt asked me on the third day whether I was managing, I heard my own mouth say that I had never been happier, and the strange thing, the thing I still turn over, is that it was not entirely a lie. I was happy. I was also being slowly emptied out. I did not yet understand that a person can be both of those things at the very same time, and that the happiness is often the thing that keeps you from noticing the emptying. I remember one meal in particular, on the 4th day, because it is the meal where I first understood how I was being read. Aaron's oldest sister came with her husband and their 5 children, and I had made a chicken pot pie the way my mother makes it, with the thick square noodles boiled right in the broth, and I was proud of it in the small private way you are allowed to be proud of a thing before anyone has judged it. His sister took one bite and set her fork down and said, not unkindly, that in their family they did not put quite so much pepper in, and that Aaron's first wife had made it plain. She said it the way you would mention the weather, and I watched my husband, at the head of his own table, say nothing at all. He did not defend my pie, and he did not scold his sister. He simply let the sentence sit there in the air between us, and in that silence, I learned a thing that would take me years to say plainly, which is that his quiet was never empty. His quiet was a room he built around you, and you learned to arrange yourself inside it. I put less pepper in the pie for the next 14 years, and I never once decided to. I simply did it, the way you step around a chair that has always been in the doorway. I did not have a word for it yet. There was the matter of the wedding night, which I will speak of only the way we spoke of everything, which is to say, around the edge of it. In our district, a girl comes to marriage knowing almost nothing, because to prepare her would be thought worldly, and so a great deal is learned in the dark in a single night by a 19-year-old who has never been told what to expect from her own body or from a husband's. I was not harmed in any way the outside world would put a name to. Aaron was within every right our way gives a husband, and that, I have come to understand, is the whole of what I am trying to tell you. It was allowed. All of it was allowed. And a thing that is fully allowed can still take something out of you that no one will ever agree to call a loss, because there is no ledger anywhere that has a column for it. That was the week I first felt the particular loneliness of being unable to say a true sentence about my own life to a single one of the good people around me. I did not have a word for it yet. I would not have one for years. I want to stop here for just a moment, because I have learned something about the people who find these stories. Most of you listening to me right now have never subscribed to this channel, and every time I see that I do not feel slighted. I wonder instead how many of you are sitting very still in a house somewhere, listening to a woman describe a week she was told to be grateful for, and recognizing the shape of a week of your own. If any part of this already lives somewhere in your chest, I hope you will subscribe and stay with me, because it costs you nothing, and it keeps these stories moving toward the women who most need to hear that they were not the only one. And before I go on, I want to ask you something, and I will read every answer. Have you ever been so tired inside a good life that you were ashamed of the tiredness itself? Tell me in the comments. I am listening now, even if no one was listening then. So we come back to the 7th morning, and the wash line, and my 2 hands on the post. The older woman who found me there was Aaron's mother's cousin, a widow named Fanny, who had buried a husband and raised 9 children and had hands like split kindling. She was not unkind. I need you to hear that, because the sentence she gave me was not delivered as a blow. She saw me holding that post, saw the basket of wet shirts I had not managed to hang, saw a 19-year-old bride gray in the face at dawn, and she came and stood beside me and put one of those hard hands flat on my back. And she said gently, almost tenderly, that I should thank the good Lord on my knees for a week like this one, because a full week means a full house, and a full house means a man who provides, and there are women in this district who would give an arm to ache the way I was aching. Then she picked up a shirt and hung it for me, and she smiled, and she went in to help with the wash, and I stood there, and I did what she said. I was grateful. I made myself be grateful. I took the ache and I turned it into thanksgiving right there at the line, because she had shown me how, and because everyone I loved would have agreed with her, and because I was 19 and I had no other frame to put it in. That is the thing I most want the women listening to understand, and it took me the better part of a decade to understand it myself. I was not lied to. Fanny told me the truth as she had received it and lived it and survived it. A full week is a full house. A man who fills your table is a man who has not left you. Every word of it was true, and every word of it was also the exact instrument by which a young woman is taught to be grateful for her own disappearing. Because once you have decided that your exhaustion is a blessing, you can no longer ask whether it is too much. Gratitude, turned the wrong way, becomes a lock you fasten on yourself from the inside, and then you hand the key to the next young bride at the next wash line, and you tell her she is blessed, and she believes you, the way I believed Fanny, the way Fanny had believed whoever stood at the line before her. I did not have a word for that either, for the way a real kindness can carry an old harm forward inside it, wrapped so softly you cannot feel the edges. By the end of the second week, the families stopped coming, and the house went quiet. And I thought that the quiet would be a mercy, that now, alone, I could rest. But I want to tell the women listening something that no one told me, because it is the truest thing I know about that first month. The visiting weeks end, but the shape they pressed into you does not. I had spent 14 days learning to be invisible so that my labor would look effortless, to keep my joy quiet so it would not turn to pride, to be grateful for an ache so it would not become a question, to make my pie the way a dead woman had made it. And when the last buggy went down the lane, I did not put any of that down. I did not know how. There was no ceremony for setting it back on the shelf, the way there had been for taking it up. The habits a young wife learns in her first hard week to survive being watched, she keeps in the empty house where no one is watching at all, because by then they are not habits anymore. They are simply who she has agreed to be. That is how it works, not with a blow, with a wash line and a pot pie and a kind old woman, and 14 quiet days, and a girl of 19 deciding 100 small times that this was the price of being loved, until the deciding wore a groove too deep to climb out of. I did not have a word for it yet, and I would carry it, unnamed, for 5 more years. I would like to tell you that I understood all of this that 7th morning, and set the shirt down and walked away, but that is not how it happened, and I have promised you I would not pretend. What happened is that I stayed for years. I cooked the meals, and I kept the joy quiet, and I was, by every measure our district keeps, a good wife. But something was set down in me that morning at the line, small and quiet and slow, the way a seed does nothing at all for a very long time, and then one spring you find it has cracked the stone. And the seed was only this. I had felt my own body reach the end of what it could give, and I had watched a kind woman teach me to call that ending a blessing. And some buried, stubborn, unkillable part of me had said, so quietly I could pretend I had not heard it, that is not the same thing. Being able to bear a thing is not the same as being meant to. I put that sentence somewhere Aaron could not reach, the way years later I would learn to put other things there, and I did not take it out again for a long time, but it was mine. It was the first thing in my marriage that was only mine. If you are a woman who has been taught to be thankful for a tiredness that was quietly taking you apart, I want you to hear the thing I wish someone had said to me at that wash line instead of what was said. Your gratitude is real, and it is good, and it does not have to be the whole story. You are allowed to be thankful for your life, and to also know, in a place no one can reach, that something in it is asking more of you than a body was built to give. Those two truths can stand at the same line at the same dawn. It is not ingratitude to know the second one. It is the beginning of staying alive inside the first. Start there. Start with one honest sentence you keep only for yourself, one you do not have to say to anyone, one no one gave you permission to think. That is where a woman begins to come back. It was where I began, years too late, at a wash line I can still see when I close my eyes. I wrote all of this down. Everything I was never allowed to say out loud in our district, the first week and the years that came after it, the parts that would not fit inside one telling. It is finished now, and it is a book, and it is waiting in the very first pinned comment beneath this video, if you would like to read the rest of it. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for being the room where this time someone was listening.